So if you want to flip your first house, then you're in the right place. We bought our very first house to flip for $185,000 and sold it for $430,000 6 months later. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do the same thing step by step. And a lot of people are going to look at those numbers and say, wow, you guys made a lot of money on this flip. Well, a lot goes into a renovation. So we'll go over step by step how to flip a house as a beginner and things to take into consideration. And at the end, we'll also talk about how much we actually made on this flip or maybe lost on this flip. If you have any questions about the process, feel free to leave them in the comments because maybe we'll go over them in one of our next videos. Our very first flip was a torn up duplex in North Charleston, South Carolina. We picked it up from another flipper that had to get out of it for personal reasons, and the condition that it was still in pretty bad shape. So we had a big project on our hands. But it was good because we were already pretty familiar with that area because we had been doing research and looking for flips in that neighborhood already. And that brings us to our first step, which is researching your market. In order to find your first flip and to have a successful first flip, you're gonna need to understand your market. Some of the tools that we used to understand the market and do our research were actually free. We used Zillow and Redfin a lot. So whether you're using Zillow, Redfin, Realtor, whatever your preference is, I suggest diving in and looking at different properties in whatever area you really wanna focus on. And when looking at these properties, I would look at the condition, the selling price, the amount of time on market. These will help you get a better understanding of what's out there and what things are selling for and how long it's taking to sell them. And what this is called researching your comps or comparable properties in your area. And when doing your research, when researching your comps, I would suggest focusing on one neighborhood. Look for homes that have sold within the past 6 months and look for properties very similar to whatever you're looking to renovate. So the first thing you're going to want to do when doing this research is to focus on homes in the same neighborhood. I would suggest homes that have recently sold within 6 months and within a half-mile radius. Now, all this can be done by just changing some of the search parameters in Zillow or Redfin, and it can filter out the properties that fit your parameters. You're going to want to look for homes that are similar to the level of renovation that you're going to be doing on your property or that you want to do on your renovation. So some people, if they're looking to do a rental, they'll do minimal renovations to make it look nice, but not go to the top of the line, like if you're trying to sell it on the market. So for example, if you're like us and you were looking at potentially flipping a 4-bedroom, 2-bath duplex in the Park Circle neighborhood, we'd go into Zillow or Redfin, put in those parameters, 4-bed, 2-bath, multifamily, and see what they come up with. We look for homes that have been renovated to see what they were sold for, hopefully in the last 6 months. And the closer you can get to the exact date that you're looking, the better off you are, because that's going to be a more valid comp than something that is further out. Now, this process is called comping the property. Now, sometimes it's not that easy to find a similar home within a half-mile that's in the exact same neighborhood as what you're looking for. And in situations like this, you're going to need to expand your search. Now, it's not going to be as good of a comp that is within that half-mile radius, within that same specific neighborhood with all the same specs and size, but it can help to get an understanding for what you could potentially sell the property for. Now, there's a lot of things that can go into the purchase price of a property. Different things like the lot size, whether it's on the corner, on a busy street, in a cul-de-sac. All these different things are things that would be good to familiarize yourself with in order to understand the fluctuations in pricing. Now, when doing these comps, you're not going to want to look at the homes that are for sale. You're going to want to look at the homes that have sold, because you can list a house for any price. It doesn't mean it's going to sell. So in your parameters, switch it over to houses sold, do it within 6 months, within a half-mile radius, and start your search and your research from there. Now, one thing I would suggest to do alongside of this is talk to a professional, talk to a real estate agent, talk to other investors, other flippers who have done it, because they're gonna have a better grip on comps than you if you're just getting started. And then you can compare your results to their results and see if there's a variance in the results that they came up with. And if there is, you can show them your comps and they'll probably let you know why you could or could not use those comps. One of the other parts of research that you should be doing is researching the financial side. Understanding the financial side is very crucial, especially as a new flipper, and actually at all levels of flipping. Understanding the financial side is crucial to your success. One of the best ways, if you're just starting off, to understand the financial side is to speak to lenders. Now, when you're looking at doing your first flip, there are different options. If you have the cash, you could pay for it yourself. If you have a friend or family that has faith in you, they could finance it. That would be private money lending. But most times, new flippers, new investors are going to use hard money lenders. And hard money lenders are lenders that will actually lend on flips, on fixer-uppers. Because what happens with traditional lending is a lot of them will not lend on something that's beat up because it won't appraise. It's not a good investment in their opinion. So their parameters are going to be a lot more strict than a hard money lender. And hard money lenders, different ones have different terms. So it can cost you more money or less money depending on which hard money lender you go with. But depending on your situation, one lender may be a better fit for you. So for example, if you do not have a lot of money to come out of pocket, then a lender that does not require money out of pocket would be a good fit, but they may have higher interest rates and your profit's going to be less than it would going with a different lender where you may need more money down, but you have a higher profit at the end. Talking to lenders, you can learn all of this. Now, if that sounds kind of daunting to you, like it's a lot to talk to a lender and do all these things, I would suggest talking to a lending broker, and that's what we did on our very first flip. Now, lending brokers are the middleman between either hard money lending or private money and the real estate investor or flipper. Lending brokers gain a commission if they can find you lending and secure you lending for your project. So their motivation is high to educate you and help you find a lender that's going to work best for you. So they're going to have relationships with different lenders, and they give you this information based on what your different parameters are and what you have to work with. So how do you find a lending broker? Well, we found ours by looking in wholesaling and real estate investing Facebook groups. There was a property that was being marketed to flippers and investors, and underneath that, the lending broker had commented, if you need lending and financing for this, reach out to me, which is what we did. Most likely there is a lending broker in your area, and if not, other flippers and investors can point you in the right direction on which lender to choose. But after you've done your research, the next step is to find your first flip, because practicing is the best way to learn, in my opinion. We actually treated our first house flip like a semester in college. Now, we never want to lose money on a project, but the way that we looked at this was, if we invest some money on this project and we break even or make a little bit of money and learn a ton in the process, then it's going to be a win for us. We weren't expecting to get rich off of our very first flip. We're basically hoping to get our feet wet, understand the process, and get ready to make moves on the next project and the next project and the next project. But the only way to really get going was to get started. So even though a lot of people say that you need to not talk about it and be about it, the next step is actually talking about it. You need to get out there and talk to people and let them know what your plans are. Let them know that you are looking at starting to flip homes and you're looking for your first project. The more people that you talk to and tell this to, the more opportunity you'll have to find a deal through them. We actually found this first flip through our lending broker. Now, the lending broker, we've been talking with him and trying to understand the financial side of things, how much it's going to cost us, which lender is going to work best for us. So he knew that we were looking for a flip. And then he also knew that this other investor was trying to get out of this flip. So he called us up and said, hey, I've got this opportunity for you. If you want to take it, here it is. And we're looking for our first flip. So it seemed to work out perfect. The good thing about it is that he had already worked out the lending for this other flipper. So he knew exactly how much the guy wanted, who the lender could be, and he also knew our parameters based on talking to us ahead of time. So the more people that you share your intentions and your hopes and dreams with, the better off the chances for them helping you find your first flip. Now, most of the rest of our flips actually came from wholesalers. And wholesalers are the people that you see the signs that say, we buy ugly houses, or we buy your house fast for cash, things like that. And the wholesaler is essentially the middleman between motivated sellers and someone that's going to buy the property, invest in the property, flip the property, or whatever their end goal is. Because a lot of times it's not so easy to go out there and find these motivated sellers. So having somebody that does that as their main job is good to have in your network. And in a lot of markets, especially hot markets, the MLS is very competitive. So tapping into these off-market wholesale groups is going to be essential for you finding your first flip. Now remember, wholesalers are there and they're trying to make their money too. So the numbers that they have, although a lot of times they might be close, I wouldn't suggest going 100% off of their ARV, their renovation estimates, their timeline, because they're gonna make it look good so they can make the most on the deal as possible. So that leads us into the next step, which is crunching the numbers. After finding a property that looks good that you think that you want to flip, you're gonna need to analyze the financial side. So here are the steps to analyzing the financial side. First, determine the asking price. Now the asking price is not necessarily the bottom line, so a lot of times there's room for negotiation. After that, you're gonna want to estimate the ARV, or after repair value. Now this is the expected value of the property after the renovations. And after that, you're gonna wanna factor in the renovation cost. Now this is gonna go hand in hand with planning the renovation, but it's something that you have to have in mind when determining whether it's gonna be a good deal or not. So for example, the duplex that we ended up purchasing, by using the tools that we mentioned earlier, we determined a $420,000 ARV, or after repair value. And we did a rough estimate and thought that the renovations were gonna come to around $110,000. So there's an equation that people use in order to determine whether a deal is a safe deal or not, and that's called the 70% rule. So some people do 75%, 80%, different numbers in between, but a general rule to go by to make sure that you're on the safe side with safe margins is a 70% rule. So for example, the duplex was gonna cost $420,000 for renovations. 70% of that number is $294,000. So what we would do is we take the $294,000 and then we'd subtract the $110,000 from it, and that would give us $184,000. Now let's assume that with these renovation costs, we're also wrapped in the lending fees and the realtor fees and all these fees. Then that tells us that we had about $184,000 to purchase this property and be in a very safe zone. Now, if you're okay with being a little more risky or using some of your own cash for the renovations and different things like that, then you can go with the 70% rule and know that you're gonna be probably dipping into those margins a little bit. But that is what is used as a kind of rule for safety, which is something that a lot of lenders use when evaluating a property. And since lenders use this, it's a good rule to kind of think about, because what lenders aren't gonna do is lend on something that is risky. They typically want to only invest money in safe investments. Now, flipping houses is risky in general, but with the 70% rule, they can feel a level of comfort that the margins are there. So if something goes wrong, which a lot of times they do, they're still gonna get their money back without having to go through the foreclosure process. So by discussing your deal with multiple lenders, you're gonna get an idea of if your numbers are on point with what you're thinking, because they're not gonna lend on it if they think that your numbers are off. And different lenders lend differently. So some may not require a lot of money down or any money down at all, but the profit on the end might be less than a lender that requires a bigger chunk down, but you make more on the back end. So talk to the lenders and find out which is the best fit for you. And once you've determined this, you can start to really hone in your search for your properties based on what you can afford and what is going to be best for you as a beginning flipper. So the next step is to actually secure that financing. What you do not want to do is find a property, go under contracts, and not have the lending in place. Because if for some reason you cannot find that lending and you go out of contract, then that's a really good way to get yourself blacklisted from real estate investing groups in your area. So on our first flip, we decided to go with a hard money lender. And with this hard money lender, we ended up needing to put down $18,500 on the project. Now on some of the projects after this one, we would actually get a pre-approval letter from the hard money lender so that the wholesaler or the agent or whoever was selling the property, they knew that somebody had cash and had approved us to use that cash to buy a property up to a certain price point. So once you have that financing figured out, you're gonna need to really hone in on the planning of the renovation. Obviously, it's best to do this ahead of time and have your numbers worked out before going under contract, but we were new to the game, so we didn't have the best grip on renovation costs. And being that we had not done any projects yet, we didn't have contractors that we had worked with and we're gonna keep working with. So what we had to do is we had to bring in multiple contractors to quote the job. And these contractors gave us such a range of quotes. They ranged from need to tear down the property, to maybe unlicensed contractors say they could come in and do it for a good deal, to some of the high demand contractors coming in saying that it's going to cost $200,000, $300,000 and it's going to be a 6-month wait to even get started because they're so busy. So we actually started to get pretty nervous about this because everything that we were getting was much higher than what we had expected at $110,000. So we were actually to the point where we're like, do we need to put this back to market? Do we need to, try to get rid of this because maybe we're in over our heads? But that's when we actually found the contractor that we used for this project. And this was a newly independent contractor that was looking for new clients, that was trying to build relationships and to keep his workers busy. So that may be a good way to look for someone that has a good amount of experience, but maybe they're just branching out. Maybe they're starting their new company, or maybe they're in between projects. Sometimes you can find situations like this where they will actually knock their profit margins down in order to build relationships or keep their workers busy. So as you can imagine, we were extremely happy to find this contractor and to be able to take on our first flipping project ever. So what we ended up doing with this contractor was we spoke to him, showed him the project, and let him know what our maximum amount that we had that we could spend on this project was and what our desired result was. Well, a little under our maximum budget. So in the end, we actually ended up spending $137,000 on this project, which was much more than we had anticipated when we did the initial $110,000 rough estimate. But after all the quotes that we had been getting, we were happy to be able to find somebody that could do this project for us. Now I want to make a note that a lot of the renovation budget was actually wrapped into the hard money loan. So we didn't have to come out of pocket for a good portion of that. Now, when we went over that budget, we did have to come out of pocket for that. Now, one thing that I suggest is making sure to have contracts with your contractor, because this keeps everything clear from day one. You have the payment schedule, you have everything set up so that there's no guesswork along the way. And one thing to do, if at all possible, is steer clear of a contractor that's going to charge you 75% upfront or 50% upfront even. Because especially as a beginning investor or flipper, you don't want to get 2 months down the road and the contractor decide to move his family to the Bahamas and you never hear from them again. That's really risky, and we really suggest not doing it that way. So what we ended up doing with this contractor was we negotiated, okay, we're gonna pay for materials for each section of the project up front, but you send us the receipts, that way it's easy for us to write it off, and we can learn the material cost of renovations. That was clutch. Now, a lot of contractors will not do this for you, but if you can find one that will, it's gonna help you immensely on learning how much it actually costs to do a renovation. And being that we weren't gonna give them a big chunk up front for the labor, what we said we'll do is after each section is finished, send us an invoice. So for example, after 2 weeks, he said, the framing is done, the rough plumbing is done. This is just an example. And here is the breakdown of the labor for it, because we would already pay for the materials, and we transferred them the money that same day. And that's how our relationship went, and it worked fine for him because his workers could get paid each week if they finished parts of the project, but we weren't risking a lot, and he wasn't risking a lot because he wasn't doing 3 months of work and hoping that we could pay it. So if you can find a contractor and work with them in terms kind of like this, I think it would be beneficial to both parties. Now, before you even start your renovation, you should start to think about the next step, which is managing your risks and coming up with some exit strategies. Flipping houses is risky, that's just what it is. But smart planning, using the 70% rule, things like this can mitigate a lot of that risk. So it's good to consider multiple exit strategies and have multiple exit strategies available when you go into your flip. So for example, with our first flip, we went into it thinking that we had multiple options at the very end at least. 1, we could renovate it and sell it. 2, we could renovate it, rent out each side long term, and then refinance it, which is the BRRRR method. 3, which is not an option in a lot of areas, but it was in this area, that we could renovate it, we could rent out each side on a short-term basis like Airbnb and refinance it, which is another BRRRR method. And another option, which was not necessarily an option for us, but for other people could have been, to live on one side and rent out the other side long-term or short-term, which is a little more flexible when you live there, in this area at least, and that can offset the cost of the mortgage, where either you're paying no mortgage or making a profit for living there. So for us, the number one exit strategy that we wanted to go for was to renovate the house and sell the house. This way we could recoup whatever cash we put into it and take whatever hopeful profits were there in order to get more properties and to keep this dream alive and to build a flipping business. So when it's time to sell the property, there are different options of ways to market your property. Sometimes you actually have people that come to you throughout the renovation process and say, I like what this is looking like. I love this neighborhood. This would be a great investment property for me. I'll buy this from you when you're done, if the price matches up. Now, this has not worked for us yet to this date, but we have had people that have approached us along the way. So that is a possibility. And along those same lines, you can market the property off market. So as the renovations are getting done, you can take some pictures and take some video, put them on some investing sites. You can do for sale by owner, do all these kind of things in order to try to sell it on your own so that you can save some money on the realtor fees if you don't have a realtor license yourself. But the mainstream way to sell your home is to sell it on the MLS. And with this, if you're not a realtor, you use a realtor. That's the way that we decided to sell this property. We put it on the MLS with our realtor, and at that time, the market was hot, Charleston's hot, and investors saw it as a potential investment opportunity because of the short-term market. So this property went onto the market through our real estate agent and was under contract in under 2 days. So as we said before, the property sold for $430,000. Now, after accounting for renovation costs, lender fees, realtor commissions, holding costs, all these things that are involved in the renovation process, it left us with, what do you think? Do we make money or lose money? We actually made a little money on this one. And for our first flip, we're more than happy with the $45,000 profit that we made on that. We were fortunate to be in a hot market, in a hot neighborhood, in a hot city. So a lot of times you can't rely on that as being the thing that's going to carry you through. But this time it did, and we learned a ton in the process. And despite this being our first flip, we still use the same framework or a very similar framework on our renovations. And of course, we fine tune it as we go. So if you're curious about the progress of this specific project, you can check out the playlist on our channel of this duplex project. And if you want tools like a profit evaluator or an inspection checklist, check out the link in our description where you can find those tools for your next or your first flip. And please make sure to subscribe to our channel because that's going to help us out a lot. It's going to help us be able to create more content like this and help us out along our real estate flipping journey. So thank you guys very much for hanging out, and let us know if you have any questions below. See you next time.